Right. Thinking about Newcastle United winning the FA Cup. The FA Cup? The League Cup. Wishful thinking that. Imagine Newcastle won the FA Cup. Don't worry, I can't win it this season because I lost. But there we go. But anyway, thinking about Newcastle United winning the League Cup at the weekend, got to be thinking about the Women's League Cup. Now, since the reincarnation of the Women's League Cup in 2011, we've already seen 3 teams win it, which has been Arsenal, Manchester City, and current champions Chelsea. And I've been thinking to myself that when will women's football have its own Newcastle United moment? I mean, fair that the big clubs are all putting their money into women's football, which is a good thing, but at the same time, it's a problem in women's football that the competitions are being dominated by the same few teams every year. Now, if you look into men's football, how many teams have won the League Cup and the FA Cup since the dawn of a WSL in 2011? Now, if you look at the League Cup, we've seen Birmingham City win it in 2011. We've seen Swansea win it in 2013. And how many teams is that in total? That's, along with Birmingham City and Swansea, seen United win it, Liverpool, Chelsea, Manchester City, and now Newcastle. So that's how many clubs? 7 clubs since 2011 have won the League Cup. And in the FA Cup, it's like a similar number of clubs, like a wide variety of clubs have won the FA Cup in the men's game. But in the women's game, in the same number of years, since 2011, they've already seen 4 clubs win the FA Cup in the women's game, which has been Birmingham City, Chelsea, Manchester City, Arsenal. And it just goes to show the problem with women's football, because it's only the big clubs that are putting their money in women's football, thus making it not very competitive. But enough about the wider aspect of the women's game. But let's zero in on the League Cup, which has seen just the 3 winners since 2011. Now, there needs to be seismic changes in order for the Women's League Cup to be competitive. And for me, one of those changes I'd like to see is that when it comes to the quarterfinals, I'd like to see teams currently, when it comes to the quarterfinals, that's where the likes of Arsenal, Chelsea, and Man City would usually come in, because they've been competing in European football. I'd like to see that be done away with. The second thing I'd like to see change in the Women's League Cup is a group stage format. Now, but back in 2011 and up until 2016, I think, if I'm wrong, please correct me on that, the Women's League Cup never had a group stage. But that's the thing I don't like about the Women's League Cup, is that it has the group stage, and the fact that teams competing in European football don't come in until the quarterfinals. And it's one of the reasons why you're seeing the same few clubs in the final every year. Like, that doesn't happen in the men's club, in the men's cup, does it? Like, we have seen Southampton in the cup final, Sunderland in the cup final. We've seen Bradford City in the cup final. Like, when has that ever happened in a women's game? Rarely ever. Like, I know we did see Bristol City in the League Cup final just a few years ago, which was great, but that's not going to happen very often, is it? Like, but I digress. But what am I talking about? Yes, I was talking about the format of the Women's League Cup. I'd like to see a format where the group stages are done away with entirely. to be replaced by straight knockouts from the start to finish. Because I believe that's one thing that will make the Women's League Cup final better. I've written this video somewhere. Yeah, so carrying on from that, another change I'd like to see is that group stage penalty shootout thing. I don't like it. Teams having a penalty shootout off the Jordan group stage. I get it's that bonus point thing, but for me, I'm not a fan of that. Teams drawing after the group stage game, just go home. A penalty shootout isn't needed. What else would I like to see? Yeah, the main thing is just get rid of a group stage, and have seeded ties from the first round, and then from the second round onwards unseeded, because then for me, if you have unseeded draws from the second round onwards, it won't be just the big clubs dominating every year. We might see a West Ham win the League Cup, we might see a Birmingham City or a Crystal Palace win the League Cup, or at least get to the semi-final or final. If you're a fan of women's football, who wouldn't like to see that? Who wouldn't like to see say, a Birmingham City or a Leicester or an Aston Villa reign supreme in the League Cup? Because the fact that the League Cup is dominated by just the same few teams every year, it's getting a bit boring, and it's not going to draw many fans to women's football. I mean, it may do in the short term, but in the long term, fans will realise, hang on a minute, if women's football is being dominated by just the big sides every year, then what is the point in watching it at all? You know what I mean? But that's just my 2 cents. What are your thoughts on the League Cup, on the Women's League Cup? And does it need to change? If so, where does it need to change? Let me know your thoughts. Yeah, I've just remembered that I wrote an article about the Women's League Cup a while ago. So I'll put that in the description below for you guys to check out. Let me know what do you think on that. Right, just one more thing on the Women's League Cup. The changes I expressed in the video, I believe it's necessary for women's football to make these changes if the product is to grow. Because currently, what we're looking at is women's football potentially stagnating because only the big clubs are doing well. Now, if you want to see a product grow, then getting rid of a group stage is a must. And also, like I expressed in the video, teams that are competing in European football can't just come in at the quarterfinal stage, because already it's they're being given a leg up to be to win the tournament basically. And well, it's not the same in the FA Cup, it's entirely different. But what are your thoughts? How can women's football grow as a product? Let me know what you think.